Get ready.
Okay.
Again, nothing serious, don't think too much. So the first question is, it's going to be about personal experience and involvement. Can you tell me about the first protest you attended and what motivated you to go?
So the first protest I attended was when I was a child, was probably May Day rallies in Trafalgar Square in the 50s, and then the first Aldermaston March that my sister was on and my father was involved in filming with Lindsay Anderson. So it goes back a really long way. Okay, so I started protesting when I was a child, but that's because my parents were communists, so there you go.
Mine was, I attended a picket of Grumwicks, which in something like 1976 or 7 perhaps. It was a big strike. It was a big union I think it was a union recognition strike.
It was women union.
It was
union
Asian women in a
film packers.
In a
South
West
London or somewhere.
That was the first photograph in the exhibition.
Yeah, it was Grumwicks. It was Grumwicks. It was really significant.
I went.
You went to Grumwicks.
Fantastic. I managed to not go on family holiday, and my mum let me stay with her friend Jenny. And I said to Jenny, right, well, I'm going off to this Grumwicks thing tomorrow or something. And Jenny didn't stop me, so...
There you go. How old were you at the time?
16 or 17. And it was pretty bloody heavy, actually.
The police were quite heavy.
The police were very heavy. It was a right old, sort of everybody link arms, sort of. Yeah, it was... that was my first one.
Have you ever organised a protest or been involved in activist groups? If so, what was that experience like? Do you mind not coughing on the audio, please? If you're going to cough, leave the room. Leave the room. No, I'm joking. So have you ever organised a protest or been involved in?
So I was outside the Royal Albert Hall at the Miss World protest because I was a teenager involved in a North Kensington Women's Liberation Consciousness Raising Group, and obviously we were very close to the Royal Albert Hall, and some of the women from the groups in North Kensington organised the Invasion of Miss World contest, but because I was a school girl at the time, I was outside protesting rather than inside. So that's one of the ones I was involved with, and that would have been the late 60s, was Miss World. 68, 69 maybe, the Miss World one.
Were you chucking flour at them?
They were chucking flour inside, we were demonstrating outside.
Oh, okay,
so at the time there was a demonstration outside, as people went in as well as the ones inside. But I mean, how far do you want to go? Because it's like the Reclaim the Night, or the Reclaim the Night stuff in London.
Is that from the Yorkshire Ripper?
No, that is from anti-porn stuff, anti-sex shops. Reclaim the Night in like Soho, the big Reclaim the Night in Leeds. There was a massive one in Leeds and Manchester where my partner got arrested. That was fun. I mean, where'd you start? There's so many.
I think in the late 80s there was a Reclaim the Night.
It's come back. Reclaim the Night has come back as a kind of concept around.
Well, and the other one, of course, was all those anti-abortion bills. All those demonstrations against all those anti-abortion bills.
Do you remember
Corrie and White and all
that unfurling of a flag in the Houses of Parliament?
No.
Okay, I was in that one. We invaded at the time. Now you can't get into the House of Commons, but at the time it's the Corrie one. It reminded me of it. At the Corrie one, you could go into the public gallery and you went up a spiral a stone staircase outside to get into the public gallery, and it was one of the Corrie was an abortion bills, and again it was my partner because she was quite an activist at the time. She and a couple of them had a big flag that she had wrapped around her body under a frock. Now this was a really dykey woman who never wore frocks, and so she turned up at the station wearing a frock, and everyone's looking at her saying, what the because underneath it she had this flag wrapped around her body, and then when they went inside they unfurled it, and at the same time as the debate was going on across the road there's a big public hall across the road, there was a huge rally happening. And so the police started to arrest the women who were jumping up and down in the public gallery. And I and a couple of other women ran across to the public meeting and said they're arresting women in the House of Commons. And all the women came out of this public meeting and occupied the stairs in the House of Commons. You couldn't do it now because it's so tight security. And sat there until the women were released.
Wow.
Excellent.
That was that was fab.
Corrie.
Yeah.
That must have been that would have been like 79, 80. When was Corrie?
I can't really remember.
I think
it
Corrie,
was-
because Corrie, it was about that time, because
Yeah.
Corrie was trying to reduce the weeks,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
That you
So the chant, Corrie was the MP trying to introduce the bill, and the chant on that one, there's a bit about chants coming up later,
Okay.
but just because we're just talking about the Corrie bill, was Corrie should pull out like his father should have done.
Yeah.
That
In
was
fact,
the,
it was sung, wasn't it?
yeah, I can't remember, but I
Can't
just remember,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite fun.
Yeah.
That was really good fun. But I suppose why I'm saying that is because some things weren't organised, some things were
Yes.
spontaneous.
Just happened, yeah.
They
Yeah.
just happened, and the invasion of the House of Commons was very spontaneous, and we were there for a couple of hours until they released Penny and the couple of other women who they'd arrested, because they have special powers of arrest in the Houses of Parliament.
Really?
Yeah.
Like it's stricter.
Yeah, well, they're allowed to kind of, they can
Manhandle
hold
you a
people.
bit
They
more.
can hold you for a while, but they let
Campaign
people-
against the Corrie
Yeah,
Bill,
when was it?
79 to
Yay.
82.
There we go.
Remembered rightly.
Okay, organising demonstrations. What else?
I organised some stuff when I was at university. That there was a lot of activity against overseas student fee increases in the early 80s, and I was involved with the people who organised an occupation at UCL, which was where I was. I can't remember how long it went on for or anything, but it was like a typical student
Sitting.
occupation
Sit-ins.
of of an admin block,
Yeah.
basically.
We did that at Sussex
Yeah.
my second year, which would have been about 74.
Yeah.
74.
There was a big famous one at LSE, wasn't there? What year was that? That was. Yeah, there used to be these sit-ins. This is actually interesting. We didn't have this in our previous conversation.
I mean, the thing is that you went on a demonstration at least once a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
like
there was like
regular. Yeah.
International
Oh God, all
Women's
the
Day,
time, yeah.
lesbian, there was Reclaim the
Yeah.
Night, there was anti-apartheid stuff. There was always demonstrations going on, and then much later
Yeah.
stuff like Clause 28 and things. But you were going on demonstrations loads.
Yeah.
So it was something you spent a lot of time, not
Yeah.
necessarily that you organised, but you participated in a lot.
A lot. Yeah.
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 How did your involvement in activism shape your personal life and relationships? That kind of leads on.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Well, I wouldn't be a lesbian
They
if I wasn't.
become
if
your friends, don't they?
Yeah, and I wouldn't be a lesbian if I hadn't been in women's liberation.
Mm.
I was talking about this. There's a woman who's doing her PhD in lesbian parenting,
Oh yeah.
a French woman, and she was interviewing me the other day, and I was talking to her about how being involved in the women's liberation movement at that time, because it is a bit unimaginable, kind of so much years later, decades later, how liberating it was in terms of challenging your assumptions about everything, and including one's own sexuality. And I think if I hadn't been a feminist, I would never have been a lesbian, and I have been now for the last 40, 50 years, it's my life.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, and I'm one of those women who chose not, as opposed to other lesbians who knew they were when they were kids or younger.
We'll worked it out a bit
Worked
later
out.
on.
No, it was a choice.
Yeah.
I think in a non-patriarchal word, I'd be bisexual. I think it was a deliberate choice. I was having relationships with men and women, and I thought, fuck this, men are hopeless. I don't want to have that in my life. So there's that. Also, I would say involvement in consciousness raising groups and democratic, what you'd call kind of democratic organisations, because all women's groups were democratic. We decided everything together. You didn't have leaders. You had discussions about how you did things. So all that, what you'd call, what I'd call from my profession, so I'm professionally a social worker, the group work that informs every bloody meeting I chair, and I chair a million meetings, and I have chaired a million meetings, and I've worked with people in teams, and my political experience has certainly informed how, not just personally but also professionally, it's not a coincidence. Those skills, the skills you learn working in collectives,
Yeah.
are transferable skills into your personal life, but also into work life.
Yeah, so it's like ingrained itself.
Absolutely.
In this person.
Yeah, and your way of relating to people, your way of, I don't know, just your way of sort of how you live your life and how you know. She stopped.
The personal is political, and the political is
Yes.
personal, and I think that's not just a slogan; it's a reality.
Yeah.
So it's your lifestyle. So being a feminist, being involved in women's liberation, wasn't just like, oh, on a Wednesday night I'll go to a consciousness raising group. It was your friends. You said that. Oh, it's how you develop your friendships, how you got your relationships, how you lived your life. So it was a cultural.
And it does also slightly mean that those are your friends. You know, like I had no friends who were Tories.
Yeah, we
I
So
didn't
you
know
live in a
Tories.
bubble. You become
being in an echo
You
chamber,
do,
yeah.
yeah.
And
I didn't
then
know
being
any
surprised when you wake up in the morning and the country's
Fucking
voted
Tories
for
have voted
Brexit.
Tories. Yes,
Tories.
exactly.
Nobody I know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nobody I knew voted for Brexit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
just so shocked, and it's yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a subculture. You live in a subculture. We live in a
I've just
subculture.
remembered another thing that I did organise was a coach load of people from my school in the sixth form. I organised a coach to come up to the Rock Against Racism.
Oh,
Victoria
well
Park.
done.
I was very pleased with myself. I
yeah,
couldn't really
good,
quite
excellent.
believe that. I just rang up a coach company and said I want to book a coach.
Fabulous.
And I must have had to have made a deposit or
Yeah.
something, but I don't know. And then I just sort of said to people, who wants to come to this? And, 50-something people said they would. So.
Do you include conferences?
Yeah.
So the first sexuality conference was in Brighton in 1975, and it was organised by a group of women from the Brighton and Hove Women's Liberation Group, of which I was one. And we'd met for about a year as a kind of CR group around sexuality. And sexuality and what then later became more kind of women's health was about understanding your body as well. So we went to Newcastle National Women's Liberation Conference, and the lesbians were very stroppy. And we said, okay, we'll organise a conference in Brighton. So we organised the first sexuality conference in Brighton, and that was amazing. We took over the student union building. You were talking about taking over. We had the whole student union building. It was only women were allowed. We took over the bar. Women slept in sleeping bags on the floor overnight, so there was no accommodation. You just kind of crashed in the rooms. And we had all these workshops about all sorts of stuff.
At Sussex?
At Sussex, 1974, 3, 4, something like that. But then I also organised, when I came back from India, I was a socialist feminist, and I organised one of the socialist feminist conferences in London at, I think, University of London. And that was a kind of weekend conference looking at lots of solidarity movements, so stuff around Nicaragua and about the arms trade. So there was, like, within the women's liberation movement, there were lots of different strands, and the kind of socialist feminist strand was probably more at that time conscious of kind of international issues, I'd say. So yeah, I'd identified as a socialist feminist and was doing lots of work in that space, organising that conference. And you kind of had to do things like organise a creche for those people who had kids, and as well as the workshops and all that,
But
big
everybody
organising
was
stuff.
smoking in
Yeah,
those
everyone did
events
smoke.
at the same time. So you'd have your conference and your creche. And the room would be full of smoke.
Yeah.
It's very smoky.
How do you think protest tactics have evolved over time, and what is your personal approach to activism? How has it changed?
Ooh,
Tough
that's a
questions,
good
guys. Tough
question.
questions.
You're going to have to... Can you say the question again?
How do you think protest tactics have evolved over time, and how's your approach to activism changed over time?
Lots of things have changed. the internet has changed the way people communicate. So there was the London Women's Liberation newsletter. Do you remember the London Women's Liberation newsletter that came out of 7 Dials and then a Women's Place, which was down by the Embankment? So there was a weekly cyclo-styled newsletter where anybody could write anything. And that was our main form of communication.
Yeah.
So like zines and like little.
Well, pre-zines.
Really?
Oh yeah, there weren't zines. Zines came later. Zines came later. It was more news and setting up meetings and publicising meetings and events and gigs and the women who are now in the Electric Landladies. I first saw them play.
Yeah.
They were playing in a band in Hackney, of course.
That's the Emma Peel fan club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those women, I've seen them play in so many different bands over the decades.
David Cartwright.
Yeah.
They were,
Oh,
that was like Alan.
Yeah.
Well, they called something like Stepney Sisters at the beginning, something like that.
They just,
So things like that,
yeah.
like gigs. So you wouldn't look on your app for, pubs, you did word of mouth. Gigs, you'd look in the newsletter. So
Or Time Out. Time
Out.
was very
City
bad.
Limits.
City Limits.
Yes.
City
that's
Limits
right.
was
City
it,
Limits
wasn't it? It
was
wasn't
the
Time
one.
Out. It
No,
was,
City Limits was the one.
Yeah, that was.
Due to the strike at Time Out. Yeah.
So I think the way we communicate has changed a lot. The way the organisation. I mean, people still do demos. They feel different, though. Why do they feel different?
They feel different. I think they feel different because now they do feel, although they're generally much bigger, they do feel like you are making a statement. There's lots and lots and lots of people there making a statement. Whereas those demos in the previous day, you were actually seriously trying to, I don't know, stop the police doing something. Or,
surround the base or something.
People would be much more, you'd go with much more expectation that there would be confrontation with the police.
yeah.
And now you don't.
Yeah.
No, it's
all for
unusual
a
for there
post
to be
on
a
social
Well,
media.
except when they did all that kettling in the, was that
Yeah,
the
they did.
studio
Yes,
lot?
yes.
But think about the poll tax riots.
Yeah.
I mean, that was.
Yeah,
I mean, that
massive.
for me, that kind of
Yeah.
represents what you're describing
Yeah.
as the round.
Yeah, and the things like the Bloody Sunday demo and so on,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
happened every year, and every year you knew there was going to
There's
be
gonna be trouble.
some very hard sort of policing.
The poll tax demo, you could smell it, couldn't you?
Yeah,
You just knew
yeah.
it was going to.
Yeah.
problem.
But that was also massive. I mean, that was much bigger than most. I mean, like the Bloody Sunday demos were usually, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000 or something, I think. But the poll tax one was
I
absolutely
think also
massive.
the nature of surveillance and the state has changed because they've got much more sophisticated, as it were, and so the spaces for doing criminal damage. So in the early Reclaim the Night demonstrations, people would go along with super glue and put super glue into door locks and stuff. Well, now you'd be done for criminal damage.
Yeah.
So the kind of borderline subversiveness around action that you could take is no longer really. Well, it's a bit like squatting. It's no longer.
It's harder. Yeah.
It's much harder to work in those kind of grey areas. Well, look at that woman who, in her 70s, who was not allowed out because they couldn't find a tag to fit her, who did the environmental stuff.
We used to, I just remembered this one, in the 80s, I was living in Brixton in 85 to 87, and we used to get dope seeds and plant them out in like, if you had outside a police station, if there was like a
Window box or
public,
something,
like a public planter or something, municipal, whatever, and we used to chuck them down, and then they'd watch them grow. Yeah, I mean they didn't always grow, but it was, We used
I think the environmentalists get closer. The
police
environmentalists get closer to. If you think about the kind of Greenpeace activism, there are pockets of activism that are much more similar to the stuff that I was involved in the 70s and 80s. But generally, the demos feel very different.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And was it the miners' strike? Was it the miners' strike
That destroyed.
I was going to think it was the miners' strike that really ramped the police up.
They were very violent.
Well, it was
weren't
more. Maybe it was more that the surveillance state came in the miners, what happened during the miners' strike, the state
Well, the smashing of the unions.
improved it, yes.
And smashing the unions.
But using CCTV, because I remember
yes.
being at Carnival,
Yes.
Not
Notting Hill Carnival in 84, 85,
Yeah.
and there were these badges that
Yeah.
you were given out,
Yeah.
and it was like smiling on police TV, CCTV.
Yeah.
We thought it was hilarious,
Yeah.
but actually that was the start of
Yeah.
everything being
Yeah.
monitored, and
yeah.
and now of course everywhere is cameras, absolutely everywhere, isn't
Yeah.
there?
And
You
more
know.
here than anywhere else in Europe.
Really?
Yeah.
We are the
We're the
most
most-
monitored
Yeah.
country in the whole of
Interesting.
Europe.
But I remember it when it was,
by tenfold, you know,
Mhm.
by a massive amount.
yeah. But that's when I remember.
Read your question out again. I'm not sure. Just to see if we.
How do you think protest tactics have evolved over time, and your personal approach to activism, has it changed over the years?
I'm too knackered.
Can't bothered.
Well, I think my approach to activism has had to change because I spent 20 years in a politically restricted post where I wasn't allowed. Well, where I would have lost my job if I'd been publicly political.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I was a senior manager in local government
Okay.
and a director, and 20 odd years in a politically restricted post you internalise, and even
Yeah.
when I stopped being the director, which is now 10 years ago, and even though I've been a member of the Labour Party all that time, because I think you have to be, for me it's kind of fundamental sort of just to say something about anti-Tory kind of politics. It's like my personal
Yeah,
protest.
to the man.
The least I can do is be a member of the Labour Party, and give them 2.5p a year or whatever it is to be a member. I still very rarely go along to meetings or get very involved, and that's the internalisation.
Yeah.
It's what it does to you. 20 years of being in a political. I used to go on demos and hope that nobody would see me. I mean, I still go on demos like Iraq, and when Trump came the first time, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd still go on demos, so I wouldn't stop completely, but I had to be really careful.
Very careful, but yeah.
And I suppose that's a personal decision about going into the establishment and being a senior manager within the establishment and trying to change things from inside, and going back to your earlier points about feminist principles and who we are and how we are as being shaped by our politics, using that, demonstrating that in that environment
absolutely.
rather than bashing away at it. So like being the only senior woman in management, always having women and sometimes working class men or minority men come and talk to me about things like career prospects and microaggressions, and you're there as a symbol and as a model to say actually it's not a white male supremacist world. So that was a choice I made to go inside rather than stay on the outside. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done. Maybe I'd have been a union activist or something like that. But I made a choice at some point to go up a management hierarchy, and then you have to compromise, which is not necessarily, everybody's cup of tea. But it's what I did, and that really has impacted on my activism in a political sense. But I would argue that being a lesbian, having a family, that my personal activism has been through my family, and has been about challenging heteronormative models of the family. So having a birth child, having a non-birth child, and adopting a child and creating a family, for me has been a political act. And I knew that when I was pregnant in 1984. That was a political act. It was a personal choice, but it was a political act to do self-insemination in 1984. It was kind of it was radical.
Early days.
Early days. I was one of the first people who did that, and it was very scary. But for me, that was a deeply political. It's political. My family is a form of my political activism, and you did it thinking, oh my God, what's it going to be like for the kids? And lo and behold, 40 years later,
It's fine.
it's fine. But we didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
And that was what was scary and is a bit unimaginable now, is that 40 years ago, what it was like even thinking that that was a possibility, imagining that you could do something and then doing it and then sticking through, you know, taking the kids to school, you know, being out and moving to Hackney, being out, you know, being a lesbian family, all of that for me is an expression of my politics,
Yeah.
which isn't about going on a demo.
Yeah.
It's a different form of political
Right.
expression. I think it's a form of political activism because you're
Yeah.
challenging the
Yeah.
status quo.
But even 20 years ago, you're 20 now. Darcy's just turned 22. And I remember when Darcy was born thinking, oh God, we've done the right thing.
What am I doing to my kids?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
You know, and now 22 years later, fine. But I
In this environment.
but it
Yeah.
I remember
Caveat.
thinking, I remember thinking
Yeah.
Caveat
what have I
it.
done?
Caveat it in
But now you're 20 years on. You're sitting in
Interviewing
picking our
us.
brains about it. So it's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I do remember. Yeah, I completely agree with what you just said about all that. I remember thinking, oh God, this is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Parents' evening's going to be tricky. You know, all those things.
Well, going back to the thing about organisation, when me and my partner decided to have a child through self-insemination, we were involved in 2 women's consciousness raising groups in London, looking at how to have children outside of heterosexual relationships. So even something as personal as choosing to have a child for me was informed by a collective of groups that came out of, in fact, were pulled together from the Women's Liberation newsletter, who's interested in having a conversation about this topic, because we were breaking new ground. We were trying to work out things like how to do it to retain anonymity. This is what I've been talking to Caroline about this, the academic
Oh, of
from
course,
France,
yeah.
because she's interested in all of this.
Oh, right, yeah.
How do you screen for other people, all of that, because it wasn't like you could just go to a clinic and say, give us
No,
some,
quite.
you know,
No,
you had
no.
to, you had to create it all.
Yeah.
So I mean, in itself, I would argue that was a form of political activism, because it
Yeah.
was a challenge
No, of
to how
course.
the status quo.
Yeah, it's a challenge to what people expected.
Yeah.
And you're the result.
Amen. Paid off,
So
hey?
incorporate that into your outcome.
It's just going to be about me, the whole thing. Are there any traditional protest methods like sit-ins, strikes, marches that you think are still effective today? Or is it all sort of shifted?
I think they're all still effective, really.
They're
I think it's
effective,
really good having the visuals of
Yeah.
Thousands.
150,000 people marching through London
Yeah.
once a month for 2 years about what was going on in Gaza. I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you remember
the sort of
the Grenfell silent one?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
very
That
powerful.
was
that was
very
really
powerful.
powerful. Yeah.
Was that on a Friday? The Grenfell fire.
There was a silent demo.
Silent,
Yeah.
Effective for 2 things. There's the effectiveness for the participants, because why do I go on a demo? I go because it makes me feel that I'm not alone in my views. I'm with a load of
Yeah.
other people who think the same way about me. So it's very validating and reinforcing. It's solidarity. It's what
Yeah.
it realises solidarity going
Yes.
on a demo, rather than you're sitting, you know, around a table and a couple of people agree. You've got, as you
Yeah.
say, 150,000
Yeah,
people think the same way as you, and that
Yeah.
is
Doing
really
something about
helpful because you feel like you're a lone voice, or you feel quite
Yeah.
marginalised.
Yeah.
So the things we demonstrate about are things where we are differing in opinion to a lot of other
Yeah.
people. So that solidarity stuff is really important. Are they effective in achieving change? I don't know if they're either more or less effective in that. They show there's resistance. I think they're also effective. Like, I really wish I could see what's going on in America in terms of people
Absolutely.
objecting to Trump, and I'm sure they are.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
what we were
they
saying,
are.
I'm sure they are, and I've heard, but we can't see it because the news
couldn't
channels
get-
are
no.
controlled
Yeah.
by
Yes.
the people
The
who are
bad
in
people.
power. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure there are people protesting against
Yeah,
it
there are,
day in,
yeah.
day out.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing. You know, if we protest around Gaza, hopefully some of that gets to people over there in Gaza,
Yeah.
and they realise that there are
Yeah.
other people in the other side of the world
Who
who
do
are
care.
concerned and care
Yeah.
about them. And
Yeah.
so I think there is that real, it's also not just for us, it's for other people. It's like, environmental politics stuff. It's, to know that there are lots of people all over the world who care about the environment. It's sort of reassuring someone why it's too weak. It's, I don't know. It's inspiring sometimes. It's
Yeah.
validating. It's helpful. It makes you feel it's worth doing.
Yeah.
It's like it gets you out of bed in the morning, or it gets you out to a demo because you think, people in Gaza know that we
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
It was like, do you remember Ginny, who lived in Theobald? I don't know if you remember Ginny.
Yes, I do remember doing that.
She was a Greenham woman and she went to jail and blah, blah, blah. And I remember her saying, I think she might have been in Holloway at one point, which was on Holloway Road. No, Camden
The Women's
Road,
Park
sorry.
Prison.
Yeah, the women's prison, yeah. And what used to happen is that women used to drive past and toot their horns.
Yeah.
And so she kind of used to say that when they were inside, they knew there were people out there
Yeah.
who were saying
Rooting for
hello.
them.
Yeah.
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 It's a similar thing to what you're
Yeah.
saying. It's a similar.
It's like
Yeah.
a sort of
Yeah.
connection to it.
Yeah.
This one's a heavy question.
Oh.
What are your thoughts on direct action versus peaceful demonstration?
Non-violent direct action.
Or violent direct
In
Violent
favour of
direct
violent direct action myself. No, I do now
Yeah.
feel, after a lifetime of
Sticking it to the man.
after a lifetime of playing by their rules,
Oh.
really, by making my lawful protest.
What's the point?
Where the fuck has it got us? Absolutely nowhere. Absolutely
You think
nowhere.
we do need the revolution now.
We definitely do.
Violent revolution. After last orders, of course.
I think the Palestine action stuff's been very good recently.
Mm.
It does require people who absolutely are prepared to put up with very serious consequences, though, and most people are not.
Yeah, the protesting laws last couple of years they've been
Absolutely.
tightened and tightened and
More
tightened and
repressive.
tightened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But Greenham was a good example of non-violent direct action,
Yeah.
wasn't
Yes,
it?
it
Just
was. It was
lying
brilliant.
down
Yeah.
there and
yeah. No, all that.
like
it's
not
all
moving.
brilliant.
It's kind of
Literally.
like
Do more
just-
of that. All right, never
just
mind the
stop
joke
oil.
about the violent, but
What about just stop oil?
yeah.
That's that hard.
So I think it's horses for courses.
Yeah.
I think direct action can be really effective because it breaks through the silencing. It can break through the silencing, which is good because it then communicates to the rest of the world that people care about something and they're prepared to go that far. I think the tricky bit for me is the misuse of it by the other side. So it's the
Yes.
fascists and the racists, and that's the bit that really worries me. There's also, I think there's a frustration with peaceful protest, which,
Yes.
and there's the frustration with peaceful protest. There's also deep kind of ethical issues around terrorism, and terrorism can work both ways. So it's not just a heavy question; it's quite a complex question
Yeah.
because you can't have one rule for one and not
No.
a different rule for others. So it's But I would come the revolution. I'll be on the barricades, but I won't be leading it because not at
I'll be
72.
going, go on, go on.
Not at 72.
Yeah.
No, I'm
No,
still
it's,
fundamentally a revolutionary, but I think it's really tricky because where would you, the where and the how, because it's so invisible.
Yes.
It's like the
Yeah.
way
No,
capitalism has developed is so insidious and powerful. Look at Trump and what's going on now. And I've just had a conversation with somebody about it actually at work, in my work, around how depressing and demoralising it is, because basically I just want to go and assassinate Trump, but I don't think that's a problem. And I don't think that's the solution, but you do.
No.
You just want to.
Oh yeah, just hope someone does.
Yeah, you just want to hope someone kills him,
was
because it's just
Saying
like
that
he's a
the other night with
madman.
My sister, I said, we just need someone to finish him off.
But he's got security.
Yeah.
But even if if it wasn't him, it would be someone else.
Mm.
You know, look what happened when they got rid of Boris. We still had nutters running the country.
Yeah. Yeah. So someone to replace them.
Yes. I sort of slightly think about that as well. Say that question again.
What are your thoughts on direct action versus peaceful demonstration?
Yeah.
It's like one of those
Can't
things you
remember what
can't
it
just.
was
It's not a
about.
yes or no answer. It's not
No,
one or the
right.
other.
It's horses for courses. It's
It
like,
is,
what do you
yeah,
want to
yeah.
achieve?
Yeah.
Do you want to achieve visibility? Then you abseil down the Houses of Parliament.
Yeah.
Or you,
Invade the news at 6.
yeah.
We talked about that one earlier. Yeah.
So, how do you think mainstream media portrays protests, and do you think it's fair?
No, terrible.
Do you remember they always used to report on numbers?
Yeah.
And they
Underreport.
always underreported, but they
Underreport.
always reported on numbers. They just don't report on numbers at all anymore.
No.
At all. And now, with the technology, it would be really easy to say, yes, there were 158,000 people on that demonstration. It would be so easy.
We used to get on the if we had a big demo on a Saturday. I
would be
remember
on
on
the
the
6
Sunday
o'clock
we'd go
news.
out and get the Sunday papers, and we'd have
Yeah.
like, how many do you think they're going to say were on the demo yesterday?
Yeah.
Knowing that like the BBC News maybe the night before had said 100,000, ITV News might have said 110,000 or whatever, you know what I mean? And then it'd be like, okay, so what do you think the Observer's going to say? What do you think the News of the World's going to say? And they'd all say different amounts depending on,
Yeah.
you know, but
Always underestimated.
generally-
always underestimate. Or they'd sort of like, you know, sort of Sunday Express. 10 people turned out yesterday. You know,
Was it to undermine the
yeah,
cause?
Yeah,
What do
yeah,
you
just to
think?
sort of
Yeah.
minimise it, the whole
I mean,
thing.
I would say
So-
that there was a whole period when generally most demonstrations would have 15 to 30,000 people on them, wouldn't they? They'd be like a reasonable amount, but not absolutely masses. And it's only since the CND ones were always
CND was a huge
absolutely massive.
anti-apartheid was huge.
Anti-apartheid.
And the
Yeah.
poll tax, that was
The poll tax and the Stop the War stuff.
Yes.
That was the
they were
early
big.
2000s,
a
yeah.
million,
They were
wasn't
missing
it?
it.
yeah.
So it's sort of you have actually got an idea of what a massive demonstration looks like, and the fact that they just never ever report it anymore.
But it was also how long, if you were starting off in Hyde Park,
yeah.
so that's where you gathered, how long it took to leave
Yes.
Yeah.
Hyde Park.
3 hours
Because how long,
sometimes.
like
Yeah.
from the front going,
yeah.
how long.
And you get to
the back.
Trafalgar Square
That's-
and they'd still be coming out. Hyde
That
Park,
that would
and
be a measure of
massive.
how many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is easy now
Yeah,
to count.
yeah,
that. You absolutely could count that.
Yeah.
now.
The other
God,
thing
you
I
can
would
get photos of people's faces. Never mind.
yeah, exactly.
And also people social media as
Yeah,
well, that
yeah.
factors into
We didn't have mobile phones.
protests.
No.
No
What?
photos.
I'm joking.
Anything.
No,
Yeah.
Pamisher were taking photographs and a few other people
Yeah.
Yes.
taking photos.
Lee
And
Harrison
that's
would
what
be
makes
taking
the
photos.
photos
I'll have to find you
back
that photo.
from those protests
Yeah.
even more like powerful, because
Yeah.
it's like now if you go to a protest, everyone's got a video of it, everyone's got a photo, so it's
Yeah,
kind
no,
of like
there
you've
was-
seen one.
yeah.
There's no like real like obviously there's a
Defining
few that
image
stick
of
out
the demo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
where it's some
Because
like
everyone's
some
got
woman
them.
screaming and that like's impactful, but a lot of the time it's just sort of a brief little like, oh look,
Yeah.
I'm politically active, oh look at me.
No,
And it's
there
like,
was
and they'll like leave
pamphlets
after
as
20
well.
minutes. But yeah, so all in all, media's coverage is bad.
Media coverage is always
Terrible,
negative.
and it's so controlling.
What about the narrative that they
So
spin?
controlling.
So not just about like
But it's
the
very
numbers.
undermining, and so
Yeah.
you kind of get all the stuff around public order. So there's never any recognition of why people might do the things that they
Yes.
do, and the purpose
They
of
don't
it.
dissect the issue.
It's
They
it's
just-
always very negative framing because
Yeah.
it's the establishment. The media is
Yeah.
run by the establishment.
Yeah.
So it's you're scum basically.
And the BBC, I must say, I mean, I really do think that the BBC now is miles worse than it used to be.
In terms of bias.
Yes,
Yeah.
and in terms of peddling
gone to the
peddling
right.
the government's line and so on, it's just
Yeah.
there's never sort of difficult questioning carried out of.
I've given up listening to
Yeah,
radio
same.
and news actually
Yeah, it's
because I
just
can't bear it.
Have you noticed a difference in how different generations engage in activism?
Generations.
Because you've got kids.
Yeah.
So
So
do
I think
When they
there have
engage.
been waves of activism about different things. So I think environmental activism. So my middle daughter was really involved in some environmental activism when she was in her late teens, early 20s. Some of it was direct action stuff. But yeah, I think it kind of goes in waves. Like for a long time it was very uncool to be a feminist, and then it was amazing when actually it became okay again.
It was
to
a
be
swear word,
feminist.
wasn't it?
It was. So the 90s
The 90s.
anti-feminist backlash was
Yeah.
horrific.
Yeah.
Not just Clause 28, but anti-feminist.
Yeah.
To even use the word feminist was really
It was an insult.
an
Like,
insult.
taboo.
So
And it's
seeing
back-
that
it's back
come
now.
back,
Yeah.
I mean,
Is it? Because
you
I've
know.
had conversations. This was Halloween, and me and my friend Rue went out, and I was dressed as Joan of Arc. It was a really poor costume. I left it to the last minute, and I had a bunch of silver jewellery, and I thought close enough to armour, right? So this was a poor costume, and I was talking to this guy outside the bar. He was like, Rue was dressed as a cat, so it's quite obvious. And she was like, "What are you?" And I was like, "Well, if you don't get it, you're not a feminist. You can't call yourself a feminist." Like jokingly, he goes, "Well, I'm not a feminist." I was like, pause. What? Because I'm so just like, if you believe in gender, and he believes in everything a feminist would believe in. We dissected it together. I said, if you believe in gender equality and gender equity and how there's no gender should be better or worse or treated better or worse in society, you are a feminist. That's the basic definition of it. And he goes, yeah, 100%. But I think I don't like the word feminist. Like I've got an issue because it should be like gender something. And I'm like, it's even the fact you've got such a hatred for women that you can't even use the word feminist. Like and I was like, I've had multiple conversations and they're like, oh yeah, I just wouldn't call it just a very strong word. I'm like, it's a fact.
It's almost like a dirty word, wasn't it?
Yeah,
at one
it's like
point?
they think that it's women hating, and the more extreme version of feminism can cross into that, like men hating. I mean, but I mean, like it's just like
revolutionary feminist.
Did you get into the club?
what?
Did you get in from the doorman?
Oh no, that wasn't the doorman. This was just a customer.
So I think
It's just a rando.
I think I'm less worried about whether men call themselves feminists or
Yeah.
not. Quite frankly, I want women to call themselves feminists and identify with feminism. And like what I've seen, so it was a dirty word in the 90s, but so it started to come back into, and a lot of young women writing, reframing the stuff that we knew, but saying it in a way that could be heard by their peers, which I really respect. So I had this argument with some other feminists of my age around how you have to let feminism reinvent itself in different generations and climb on the backs of the women before us, because that's what we do. You progress. So you know, my daughters can take for granted some of the things I couldn't take for granted, like when I was growing up, you never saw a woman driving a bus. You know, in the 50s, the gendered nature of work was horrific. Let alone equal pay. Let's not even get into equal pay. Just the first time I saw a woman bus driver in New Zealand I was completely shocked, because I'd never seen a woman drive a bus in London, in England. So things that you now wouldn't even think twice about are
a woman
I say I'm using quite simplistic examples, but they seismic. Seismic. Thank you. Seismic shifts in thinking that feminism has to be reinvented by each generation to make sense for. And some of the things are, pornography's got worse, if anything, because it's so much accessible. So. Some things get worse, like I would say pornography and sexualization is a lot worse than it was than when I was growing up for all sorts of different reasons. Some things get better, like women having access to being, manual trades, or, there are more women in management than there would have been 50 years ago, etc. So some things maybe move on and other things get worse because society changes. But each generation of women, young women, I'd say, have to reframe what feminism means for them. And it's not going to mean the same as what it meant to me growing up in the 50s after the war. It's going to be really different. And I'm happy and comfortable with that. What I find difficult is, as I say, some women, feminists who have been around for as long as me, who are very stuck in their own personal, I suppose, framing of what they think feminism should be. And I think you have to go with the flow, and I'm happy to say, well, this is what I feel because it's my experience, but I can hear what you're saying is meaningful for you, that are your battles, and they're going to be different battles to my battles. My battles were all sorts of odd different things. Like, I don't know, when I did my PhD, I started doing my PhD, the data on women not completing their PhDs in the early 80s was like 85% of women never finished their PhDs because they went off and had kids. This was this was in the early 70s. Sorry, I was doing it in the mid 70s, and I thought, I'm going to finish my PhD. You know, so I mean, that's because you looked at that data, and it wasn't because they were stupid. It was because they went off and got married and had kids. Because that's what you did. You weren't expected to go off and have a job and be an academic. You were expected to. Your husband did that. You were the one who stayed at home and looked after the kids. I'm still in that. I was born in 52, so I'm still in that kind of context, which I think is unimaginable. Is that what you'd expect now? You wouldn't expect that.
I think it's more
You
women
have, hopefully
who
not.
get further in education now.
Yeah, in fact,
It's
women are more successful.
Women have overtaken them. Cool fact.
No, I think you're right. So the battles, I'm using it just as an example of the battles change because the situation changes.
Yes.
What do you think, Elspeth?
I think the same.
I remember, and I can't remember what year this was. It would have been the 70s, mid to late, when I think it was Anna Ford was the first woman newsreader.
Yes.
Was it Anna Ford? No, or was it Angela Rippon?
it was
Angela Rippon.
yeah.
Angela Rippon, who was on Strictly. That's how you all know her. Oh, and whenever she came on, there'd just be insults flying at her on the TV, you know. I mean, and now it's like completely normal to have women reading the news.
But equally, for instance, like Brighton buses are currently running women bus drivers recruitment thing,
Fantastic.
which is really good, and you do see very many women bus drivers.
Well,
in
as I
Brighton.
say,
But you don't. I mean, you do see some in.
You don't see very many
don't
on the
see
London.
very many.
Well, not on the routes that I go on.
I see a few.
Do you?
Yeah, you see a few, but it's still
It's very
dominated by
masculine.
men.
Yeah.
But I use it as an example of like it was absolutely,
absolutely
shockingly incredible
But
to
if
see
you
a woman
wanted to
bus
be,
driver.
if I wanted to be a bus driver, I'd go off and be a bus driver.
Yes.
But maybe 50 years ago, I wouldn't have thought I could
Exactly.
do that.
Yeah.
You know.
That's what
yeah,
shifted.
Yeah.
That's what shifted.
Yeah. That's right. Well, it's the same with all that sort of stuff, really, and manual trades and so on as well. Although they are still very predominantly men. You wouldn't. A woman thinking, oh, I might go and train as an electrician, isn't going to think, oh no, I can't because women don't do that anymore, is she?
Yeah, but I think you still probably have to be quite
You have to be
sure
quite
of
tough.
yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
And tough and deal with all the
yeah,
crap.
Yeah. I say this because my daughter-in-law is considering training as an electrician.
Oh, cool.
That's good.
You used to want me to be a plumber. Your mum.
Yeah,
We thought
lots
you'd
of money.
We thought you'd make a
No,
good
but
plumber.
at the time they'd look at my sister and they'd be like, "You should be a lawyer. You'd be high up lawyer." And they turned to me in the same breath and they go, "You know what? Great
Well,
plumber."
you know what that was about. We wanted some free trade, so we thought plumbers earn a fortune, probably more than lawyers.
Yeah, true. But at the time I didn't know that. I only thought about like
We'll have
obviously
this
plumbing is
plumber
the status of it.
save
I
us
love
some
it.
money.
Every family should have a
You
plumber and a
need-
lawyer.
You need a lawyer. You've got a lawyer in
You've
your
got a
family.
lawyer.
You need a lawyer
I've
in your
got too
family.
many carpenters in my family.
Yeah.
We've got too many
Yeah.
carpenters.
Um,
So it's good that
We've got a load of
my
bloody
training
doctors
is
and
lawyer.
nurses in
Oh,
our
we haven't
family.
got any doctors.
Yeah. They're handy though.
So this is going to go to more the graphic design things that I might use to influence. But how do visuals like posters, banners, and fashion play a role in protest culture?
I think they played a big role because, like, you know, you had to have the T-shirt that had the slogan on, and that you were
And the
cool.
badges.
And the badge. And badges still exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got, in fact, Rivka put it in her bedroom, original Women's Liberation poster which has the 6 demands before we had the 7th demand, and I've still got that, and it's really precious to me because it.
And could you take a photograph?
I'll take a
send it?
photo and send it to you.
Yeah.
Posters are really, really important because they. I think it's about symbols. It's like having visual symbols to reinforce the identity. Fashion, I wouldn't call it fashion, but kind of culture in that broad sense. So what, you know, certainly when we were talking about this in the context of Poison Girls, certainly how you dressed and how you looked was important because you would then send a
message.
You walk message. If I walk down the street and see someone else in a boiler suit with Doc Martens, you think, oh yeah,
Yeah.
and especially when
Kindred spirit.
especially when you're in your alternative, so you're against the mainstream. It's about solidarity.
Yeah.
I mean, my heart goes when I see 2 women walking down the road hand in hand, or 2 men, because that's something that it's about, you know, reassurance, visual. It's kind of solidarity stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, it's sentimental, a bit sentimental, but it is because you couldn't assume it, because there was a time where you couldn't walk down the street holding the hand of your girlfriend. You couldn't do that without being attacked, abused, whatever.
But also the visual, like, okay, the T-shirts, the badges, but they're fly posters.
Hold that thought.
And
Noise.
fly posting was
was important.
huge, and graffiti.
Oh, do you remember all
and
the fabulous feminist graffiti?
Yeah. Well, I did some under. I should take a photo of it somewhere. Under, you know, Waterloo Bridge.
Yeah.
You can come and then you come up onto the Strand, but then you can go down. And there's a tunnel.
Yeah, there was Aldwick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was 2 women's symbols together there. That was me. That was Janet on the back of her motorbike. Janet was on the front of the bike. I'd be on the back. With the
I
spray
did
can.
some. I've told you this. I did some in Oxford because I was living in Oxford, and we went round Oxford and spray painted. And I was the lookout person in the car because I had a car. So I was the lookout person in the car, and I did the spray painting.
So was Janet
That
was
would
on
have
the
been
bike.
80. When did you do yours? That would have been
It was
79, 80.
No, it was a bit later than that. It would have been 86, 87.
Oh,
we did a
right.
lot around the 87 general election, so the posters would be spraying those. And then Janet would go back the next day and take a photograph in daylight. Yeah. And that was fun.
Yeah.
God, yeah, we were terrible.
You see, now you'd be done for just.
Now there'd be cameras everywhere.
And you'd be done.
exactly.
number
You'd be
plate
done.
recognition.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd
Done.
be
Done.
Yeah.
done, yeah. So.
Yeah, done for criminal
damage, yeah.
whatever damage it is. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Have you ever designed or seen a protest sign that really stuck with you? If you can think back that far, guy.
Well, I would say loads, but of course I can't remember any of them at all, really.
There's the basic stuff like the women's symbol and lesbian symbols, the sort of symbol stuff. The man needs a woman like a fish needs a bicycle. So there'll be slogans, personal as political, on badges and things.
I remember the act up, silence equals death.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
That was
very,
really powerful, I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and rainbows.
Yeah.
All the rainbow stuff before it got taken over by the NHS during COVID. It's sort
And
of got a
the,
bit acculturated.
Pink triangle,
Pink triangles, yeah.
double-headed axe, we were talking about that earlier.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and people would wear earrings. Like I had a whole load of earrings with symbols on them. So
Yeah,
it's sort of like
earrings.
subtle. It wasn't like, well, yeah, sometimes it was like t-shirts and stuff, but sometimes
Yeah.
it was a bit more subtle. And it was signals. It was about, so again, it's about sisterhood and solidarity.
Yeah.
But I think the poster, the placard on the demo has not faded at all. I mean, there's absolutely
True, yeah.
fantastic ones on the Gaza demos now.
I like it when people do their own.
Yes.
And you get
yeah.
a kind of 1,000 flowers flourishing or whatever, and everybody and it's much. I think that's maybe changed or not changed, or that changes with the nature of what people are protesting about. But that whole thing about having a personal statement.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have all the SWP placards and
Yeah.
you know, the ones that are mass produced. But the ones these days that I really enjoy are when people do their own very personal statements.
I had
Yeah.
I
one
think they're
from-
fabulous.
Yeah, I had one
Yeah.
from. I went on when I was studying politics at Stokey. We went to the what is it, the Supreme Court, High Courts of Justice, something like that. It's right
The
by
High Court.
Westminster. Yeah. And we did a trip there, and then we were walking around the corner because Downing Street is just around the corner. And then my teacher was like, "Oh, we'll just go look." Obviously, you can't knock on the door and go in, but she was like, "Yeah, we'll go look." And then we went and then there was a protest outside, and it was Jamie Oliver was there because he was working hand in hand with the government about making schools healthier or doing more healthy eating stuff for, I don't know whether it was commercial food or if it was restaurant, whatever it was. And basically the government had gone back on it.
Yeah.
And they've either
Yeah.
delayed it or they
Yeah.
just said, we're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So he was out there protesting, and I got given this, and we were just rocked up, and we were like, oh, we're all politics, fuck it, we'll get involved. And then there was given this sign that someone painted. I've still got it somewhere in my room, but it says Eton Mess at number 10, which I think is very good, because Eton, they went to Eton, and Eton Mess, I thought it was really clever.
You've still got it, haven't you?
I thought it was really clever.
This one was at the most recent Palestine demo that somebody from Brighton made, from the Riviera to the sea. That was, just after Trump had done
that's clever.
his ridiculous sort of. It's going
You know,
to be beautiful. It's going to be lovely, like a Riviera.
But do you know the one I remember? Kitty will remember this because she told me about it. Elspeth's sister Kitty was a librarian.
Yes.
And she went on there was, in the 80s, there was a demo that she went on, and it was to do with the discrepancy in pay between academic librarians that worked in academia, and public librarians. And one got paid less than the other, and I can't remember which way around it was, but there was librarians all went out on strike for the day and marched to protest against this, and so of course we were all going, what was it? Was it really quiet? But then Kitty then said that the best placard that she saw was this one man in his anorak, librarian, holding up his homemade placard, and it just said, "Rectify the anomaly." He's a librarian. Of course, he's going to come out with something like that. Rectify the anomaly. That's it. Just do it. Yeah.
So they were
I
sort
love
of
that.
reflective
Rectify
of
the
the
anomaly.
statement behind the protest. So
Yeah.
that was reflective of the
Anomaly in pay.
Yeah,
the anomaly in pay, but also it was because it was a librarian. And there was something really clever about it, and sort of bookish, and
nerdy.
smart, nerdy. Rectify the anomaly. Rather than just give us more money.
Songs and chants.
Yeah, songs.
Songs,
Run me through
songs
some.
and chants.
That was
Oh,
big. Yeah,
God.
that was big. Run me through some. I might use them.
I did some earlier. I did the.
Which ones did you do?
Well, I just remember the ones, on Gay Pride ones. 2468. Is your girlfriend really straight? 3579. Don't worry, neither's mine. To the people who were spitting on us.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
2468. Is that copper really straight?
Yeah.
All those ones, and then the she'll be coming with a woman when she comes. What else was there? There was the one. Do you remember when Bota came in '84? Bota came over to meet Thatcher at Chequers, and we all marched. And it was when they were trying to fast track Zola Budd into to run for
British
GBG. Yeah. And I think it was Ian Hawkins. Do you remember Ian?
Yes,
He used to go out with Steph,
yeah.
nice Ian, and he made up this chant that was the best one of the lot that we came up with, which was, "Bota is a racist crud. Send him back with Zola Budd." It's but it's all homemade, they're great. Yeah. Which ones do you
I
remember?
can't remember. I'd have to think about it. I mean, they were very. There were very common themes, so it was always like 2468 or
Oh, we're here, we're queer, and we
or
ain't
so
going
and so
shopping.
out or out,
Okay.
out.
Yeah.
You know, they were very,
Like
they were
Maggie,
very,
Maggie, out.
yeah. So
Yeah.
they're,
Maggie, out.
yeah. So there are certain forms that,
Bang.
like the out, or 2468, which were used all the time
Yeah, it was
around
redone.
whatever
Yeah.
demo you were on.
Yeah.
We hate Thatcher and we hate Thatcher. We hate Thatcher and we hate Thatcher. We hate Thatcher and we hate Thatcher. We are the Thatcher haters. I always thought that was a bit lame.
No, it did not a lot of cleverness going
No.
into that one. It's very, very
Very
simple.
easy though.
Yeah.
Very easy.
Very
Yeah.
catchy, very catchy.
Very
Okay, which
catchy.
ones do you remember? Sorry, the Tory. We hate the Tory. We hate the Tory. We have
Well,
the
we
Tory
had Tories,
haters.
we had
Yeah.
Tories, we had Tories. That's the same.
Thatcher, milk snatcher.
Yeah.
That was 70s, wasn't it? When she was
Yeah,
taking the
that
milk
was a
away.
long time. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, some of the chants were.
What about
But that was the fun
Niles?
side of it, wasn't it?
The
That's,
chanting.
The creativity.
yeah,
behind it.
yeah.
And
The
it still
slogans
is,
and
you
the,
know.
yeah.
It still is.
Have you do you think protests are more inclusive than the past, and have you experienced or witnessed tensions between different activist groups?
First bit of the question.
Is do you think protests
they're
are more
more
inclusive
inclusive?
than the
Not
past?
really. I don't think so, really. I mean, are you talking about demonstrations?
Yeah.
In terms of
Awareness.
ethnicity and
Yeah.
gender and stuff.
There are
Diversity.
always signers and so on
Yeah.
speech on the stages where there's
Yeah, that's
there's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
a signer,
sign.
which there didn't ever used
Yeah.
to be. Don't know when that came
I think
in.
it depends a lot on the topic and the
Yes.
subject that you're demonstrating about. So,
Yeah.
for example, thinking about something like the anti-apartheid stuff was very mixed, but then the nature of the population mix has changed now from 50 years ago. So, and it depends, if you're demonstrating in London or you're demonstrating in, Suffolk. If you were to
Yeah.
go on a demonstration in Suffolk against a local nuclear power station, I imagine it would be less diverse than a
Yeah.
demonstration in Hackney.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the recent demonstrations about Child Q or the stuff around, as I say, it depends a lot on the nature of what you're demonstrating about, who's there. But I don't know. I think they're more diverse. I think they are more diverse. But
I think
they're
they
more
are, actually.
but they're more diverse because the population's more
Yeah.
diverse.
It's more diverse than 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
But in terms of demonstrations being accessible by people in wheelchairs
Yeah.
or whatever.
There's more effort now.
Yeah. I think there is actually, and people
Like-
are. But it is something
There's
that
more
organisers
Think about.
do
Yeah.
Yeah.
have to pay some attention to, albeit not always get the results that they
Yeah.
should be getting. But
So, final question. You guys have made it. What would you like to pass on to the next generations of activists and protesting? If you could, or a piece of advice, or just a general hurrah.
Do it. Carry
do
on
it,
doing it.
Do
Don't
it.
stop.
Yeah, don't stop.
No.
I think it's
Do it
very
more.
easy to feel powerless. I feel incredibly
Yeah.
powerless. I feel
Yeah,
quite
same.
powerless as an older woman. I think
Yeah.
ageism invisibilises you,
Yeah.
definitely. But also what's going on in the world is so horrific these days. And internationally is so awful, and particularly in the last few weeks with Trump
Yeah.
and Putin and all the
Mm.
shit that's going on at the moment. It's very easy to feel powerless. And the thing
Yeah.
about activism, even if it's very local or limited to a specific topic or thing that you feel passionate about, it's at least some form of pushback against the status quo. So it's like, I don't care. Well, I do care what people demonstrate about. I don't, but it has to be about the right things. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be, I don't want people to go on fascist demos or whatever. But to be an activist, to say things aren't right in society, and I want to raise my voice because I want people to know that I don't agree with
Challenge
the
it.
status
Yeah.
quo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Lie
important.
down and take it.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
it has changed. I think it's more difficult now. I think
Well, I
It's
think
really
the sort of the
hard.
forces of evil, the
Yeah.
forces of evil have managed to control things, reduce things, stop people's ability to stand up against them, ignore people, blank people, just go, look at that rather than that, to such an extent. And with all the kind of, all the new press.
Well, let's blame the immigrants rather than the capitalists.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
That's what it's
yeah.
about. If you think about
Yeah.
what's going on in the States, it's let's blame immigrants for the fact that
Yeah.
capitalism is destroying
Yeah,
our economies
yeah.
and people's lives.
Yeah.
Let's blame immigrants for the increasing inequalities. Inequalities have increased in the last 20 years. They were decreasing up till
Yes.
the noughties, and now inequalities have just gone off
Creeping
the
back
scale.
up.
The
Yeah.
level of child poverty in this country, the people using,
Yeah.
who would have thought people be using food banks in 2025? It's
Yeah.
unimaginable,
Yeah.
and
Shocking.
it's just getting,
It's
getting worse.
normalised. It's
Yeah,
normalised,
it's normal.
and the people who, the government and the MPs and the press. I've particularly got it in for the press at the moment. Actually, I just think journalists, by and large, are just absolute toadies now.
They always were.
There have
Don't you
always
think there
been
were?
good ones like
There's
the
been some good ones.
good ones there have been, and then you see the poor sods in Gaza, those murdered journalists in Gaza, and you see these sort of BBC fat cats just lying.
Yeah.
It's just shocking.
Well, there is something
Terrible.
actually, that's a good point around lies. The whole fake news, the fact that Trump can speak
Can speak
absolute lies and they're
nonsense,
taken as truth, and it appears that a
Or
lot of
it's not
American
even that,
people
it's
think that-
nobody challenges it.
No,
Nobody's
well,
trying.
Did you see? He recently was trying to spin the narrative because obviously he's Putin's best friend now. About how it was Ukraine that invaded Russia.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
What a lie.
a woman, very very very, her name's something Crockett. She's incredible. I don't know how the American political system works, but she's high up there. She's sat in a chair at a desk addressing people. So she's high up somewhere, and then she's like, is anyone brave enough to actually stand up and say that Russia invaded Ukraine? Because what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, what is going on? Like, President Trump is trying to spin this narrative, and like no one else would just outrightly say it, and it's like. This is like this
It's
is
a
the
lie.
issue.
It's
He's
lies.
spinning.
He
He's being
lies,
allowed
and
to lie.
He lies.
Yeah.
He lies, and it's horrific.
And he bullies. His
Every
level of
blow.
diplomacy is actually on the ground. Same
No,
as
I
JD.
think
It's horrible what recently happened with Zelensky.
We're not.
It's
It's
horrible.
the next period of time is going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Right.
And so anybody, your last, just kind of stand up and
Yeah.
say this isn't good enough, whatever that might be. Whether it's something very local that you feel is in. That you can have some influence over, or it's something that feels way out of our control, like global warming. Again, he lies about global warming because he doesn't believe in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cyclones in Australia as we speak tonight.
Other.
Yeah. In
Oh God.
my in-laws, my brother and sister-in-law and Christine's family in Brisbane, there's a big cyclone hitting Queensland. They're really worried about it. You can't tell me that's not tied up with the global warming stuff.
Exactly. Right. On that note.
On that happy note.